Hey everybody, welcome to Sound Bombing. I created this show for people who want to experience a radical, life-changing journey through the sounds of my diverse guests. I hope that each sound you hear on this show will strengthen your faith, encourage your dreams, and challenge you to awaken the greatness within you.
Drop the bomb. Drop the bomb. We're gonna drop the bomb. Drop the bomb. We're gonna drop the bomb. Drop the bomb. We come to drop the bomb. Drop the bomb.
This is a journey into sound. A journey which along the way will bring to you new color, new dimension, new values, and a new experience.
LaMarr Darnell Shields.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. What's up, Sound Bombing community? You all know who I am. I don't know why people, when they have their own show, they have to reintroduce themselves. But let me just do it again. You don't know me? I am Dr. LaMarr Darnell Shields, and I am the host of the greatest show online, Sound Bombing. And I'm so excited that you decided to hang out with me today because you could be doing anything. And so I, as they say in the gospel world, I count it all joy, but I'm so grateful and honored that you are here with me today. But if you are a new guest, I'm going to introduce something to you. And if you are a bomber, if you've been here for a long time, you know what we do before we start. We do our mindfulness and meditation. Well, really, we do our 3 breaths. So if you're new to this, find a comfortable position, put your feet on the floor, close your eyes, or just find a comfortable position. So we're going to do our 3 breaths. And so we start like this: inhale, and then exhale. We're going to do it 2 more times. Inhale through your nose, and then exhale. 1 more time. Inhale, and then exhale. And bombers, what do we call that? You know what we call it. We call it the breath of life. And so again, I'm honored that you're here. We want to start out, we always start out with the breath, because what that says is that says that we are still here. Somebody in some other part of the world did not make it today, but we should be grateful and honored that we did. And I'm grateful and honored that I have the technology, that I can come into your room, to your house. That's kind of scary, right? To your car, through your phone, through your tablet, that my voice is here with you. And so I am honored and grateful for that. And so as always, we have an amazing show. But for those that are new to us, I hope that you've been checking us out on every platform. We're on every platform that you can think of. Also, if you want to know more about me, go to drdrlds.com. And as always, we know we have an international pandemic, and I'm hoping that you are taking care of yourself. And what does that mean, Dr. Shields? That means that I am cleaning my hands. I am using things on my hands to clean the germs as much as possible. I am actually eating whole, healthy foods. I am actually drinking water that is very, very healthy with high alkaline content. I am taking all my vitamins and all my minerals. I am doing all those things because we talk about this. And you are physically distancing yourself from individuals, not socially distancing. I hate that, because we're social animals. We need to physically distance ourselves from one another, but not socially, because we are social creatures, and we need to keep socializing to really help our elders, help anybody out that needs some support during this time. And speaking of support, I have somebody that's going to support us today, and you're going to be so excited that she is joining me here. So Sound Bombing community, I always start with the question whenever I get started, because I am full of questions. Albert Einstein said, he asked a lot of questions before he goes into the answers. And I think a lot of the times the answers are in the questions. I think quite often we're constantly looking for some answers outside of ourselves when the issue started here. And so I always bring on people here who can answer some of the questions, but I typically start out with a question, and today is no different. So here we go. Have you experienced some form of abuse, trauma in your life? I know I have. Maybe it was handed down to you generationally, Or maybe you just found yourself on the wrong end of a relationship. Have you endured loss of a loved one or a friendship? Many of the experiences we have in our lives leave us questioning who we are and why we are here on this earth. We begin to question our worth, or even worse, we don't value ourselves enough to even question it. We accept the life we have, envying other people's lives around us, but not feeling deserving of abundance of ourselves. Well, our next guest has walked in those same shoes. She was born into a family that handed her ancestral pain and trauma. At the age of 18, she was diagnosed with an incurable illness and underwent over 30 surgeries. Do you all hear me? 30 surgeries, only to be told there was nothing more that could be done for her. At least that's what she thought, because her story is amazing. Who am I talking about? I am talking about Tina Encarnacion, because Tina has escaped abuse from a man who was supposed to love her. She has held her daughter's lifeless body in her arms. She has experienced pain deeper than any one person ever had to shoulder alone. However, in the face of adversity, she found her way to the light. She considers herself blessed to pay it forward, teaches other women who are in the depths of their despair how to regain their voice, grab a hold of their power. We're going to teach you to take your power back and claim your destiny. If you are ready to discuss your journey and play in the realm of possibility, Tina is the woman who can actually do this, who can help you start emerging from the fire and leave your mark on this world. She's a wife, a mother, an inspirational speaker, a transformation coach, a Reiki master, and a teacher who has a passion for life and overcoming obstacles. She was diagnosed with this particular disease, but now she's living with this and sharing her story with us all over the country. And she's going to be in the studio. Well, she is in the studio right now. But her book, I'm excited to talk about her book, Stuck in the Fire, A Story of Resilience, is an interactive, self-explorative book. And she is joining us right now. Tina, welcome to Sound Bombing.
Thank you so much for having me on your show today. I'm so excited to be here.
I am so excited. You are bright and up early in the morning. Let them know where you are calling from. She's not physically in the studio because we can't bring people in the studio, because I like Tina, but I don't know if she has COVID. She likes me, but she don't know I have COVID. And I know she dealt with a whole bunch of other stuff, but we ain't bringing COVID into this space. Let them know where you said no. Oh, no. Let them know where you are, Tina.
I'm coming in from California.
California in the building, and we have people all over. We have a lot of people in California who loves the show. So thank you for joining me, Tina. Let's get down to it. How are you doing, first of all?
I'm doing great. It's early, but I was able to get 12 hours of sleep. So I'm great.
That means that she's ready for all the questions that you all sent to me. She's able to answer all those questions because she has her energy up and she has her coffee. So let's get down to it. Tina, how has your personal journey shaped who you are today? And before you really get into that today, let's talk about your journey in general too, where you are right now.
Well, right now I am so blessed. I'm living a life that I never imagined was even possible for a woman like myself. So if we talk about today is a dream. I'm literally waking up every day in a dream, and I'm so grateful to be here. And I'm blessed that I went through the journey that I've gone through so that I can be grateful for my surroundings and for the life that I live.
So you talk about today, you are grateful, you're in a good place. But before this, Tina, based on what my producer sent to me, you weren't always in that space. Can you share with us your journey? Because I love to hear that you say today, but let's talk about yesterday. Let's go way back, Tina, and talk about before the book and before the speaking engagements.
So I was born into a family of 5 children, and I was number 4, and we were all 13 months apart. So my parents had their hands full.
Somebody was getting it in right after.
Right?
You all weren't enough.
They didn't have cable.
Some people don't know what that means, because Tina, I tell my kids, when I was a kid, there were 4 stations. That's so funny. They didn't have cable, so they had to make up their own shows, right?
Right. And their kids were perfect. Like, if you think of like the stereotypical Leave It to Beaver Cleaver family, like my parents, their kids were perfect until I came along. I was born with ADHD and some compulsion disorders and things, and they didn't know how to handle my energy and the way that my brain fired off. And not only that, but they were handed down buckets of generational trauma and pain as well, and they didn't know how to process it and not hand it down to us. So because I was such a out of control child, as it was put, they basically took all of the ancestral trauma and pain from their childhood and handed it to me. And growing up in that atmosphere, I remember from as young as I could remember a phrase that still rings in my head today. And it was, "Tina, I love you because I have to, but I do not like you." And that
Let's
phrase
stop right there. What did that do to you as a young person? And at what age did you hear that?
Honestly, I don't know at what age it was spoken to me. It was spoken to me my entire life. Mm-hmm. But I can, as young as I can go back, I can remember it being said. And at that age that I was, what that told me was I was worthless. I was unlovable. I wasn't wanted or needed. And it really was devastating as a child to hear that and to feel those emotions. And so I filled those roles. I was like, well, if I'm worthless, there's no reason to try to be better. If I'm unlovable, there's no reason to try to get love. And so I was like, well, that's how you see me, so why be any different? And so I became that out of control child. I would lie, I would steal, I would get in physical altercations with my siblings.
So you became what they said. You became what they said that you are.
Yeah, I did. And at about the age of 10, I can recall thinking of ways to end my life because it was just too painful to live in those shoes. And at that time, right when I was about to solidify my plan, God brought an angel into my life. And she saw me for who I was. And she took me under her wing and taught me that I was worthy, and taught me that I was lovable, and taught me what love looked like. And I was so grateful for that woman. And she kind of started to give me hope. It wasn't the whole picture, but it was hope. And then at 13, my parents had homeschooled me from 5th grade until high school, and homeschooled all 5 of us children. So we literally were stuck in a room together 24/7. And it was just a really hard experience to not have an outlet for that emotional trauma that was pushed on me every single day. And so at 13, I started to go to public high school, and I met a group of friends that introduced me to Christ. And we were raised in an atheist household. God was not in the picture. I remember my grandma taking me to a Science of the Mind church, which is not a Christian church. It's like you're your own God, basically. You create your own consciousness. And I had heard about Jesus through the hymnals that they sung. And I wrote a song about how Jesus had created me around the age of 10, like when I was trying to search for hope. And I had sung it to my mother, and she laughed and she goes, "Honey, Jesus didn't create you. Me and your daddy did." And I was just like,
yeah, she like, didn't you notice every 13 months we
right?
somebody different? Do you not know what's going on in this house?
Right? Do you not know me and your daddy are really good at making kids?
So we must be.
Right.
So
exactly.
she shot your thought down.
Yeah.
So there's more pain and trauma. You're worthy, you're worthless. And then now you have this spiritual moment, and then you bring it to your mom, and then you get shot down again.
Exactly. Yeah. And so at 13, I was allowed to go to public high school, and that was a challenge in itself. And I met this group of kids that invited me to their church. And so I kept asking, can I go to church? Can I go to church? Can I go to church? And they're like, for like 3 months, I was told no. And then finally, I'm very persistent. And so finally they were tired of me asking, and they said, okay, fine, you can go. You have to find your own way there. You cannot believe in anything that they preach. You cannot give them any money, and you can only go for social purposes, You can't do anything outside of the youth group. And I was like, okay. Well, when I went there, the pastor was preaching the book of Revelations. And I didn't know if Jesus was real, but I knew that if he was, I sure as hell didn't want to end up in hell. And so I became a born again Christian at the age of 13. And once my parents found out, the living environment in the house became even worse. I was moved out of my siblings' room. I was put into the living room, and I was basically separated from the family. My parents couldn't put me out on the street because legally I was still a minor. So they just basically allowed me to live in the house, but I was no longer a part of the family. And so as you can imagine, that feeling of worthlessness just grew and expanded. But now I had God. I had God, so I had hope. And I had a way to keep living. At 18 years old, I was an adult, so they kicked me out of the house, they were like, you're done, get out, we're done with you. And about 6 months along after I moved out of the house, I started to get very, very sick, and I would eat, but it would come back up. And so I started going to doctors, and 3 of them told me that it was stress. If I would just reduce my stress, I would be fine. 5 of them told me it was attention-seeking behavior and diagnosed me with bulimia. And in 3 months, I dropped 75 pounds. And I knew if I didn't figure out what was wrong with me, I was going to die. So I went back to my father, crawled back to him, Daddy, please help me. And he closed down his shop. He accepted me with open arms. And he found a doctor who knew what was wrong with me. And they diagnosed me with echolalia, which is an esophageal condition where your esophagus works opposite. So when you swallow, instead of pushing food down to your stomach, it pushes food back up. Wow. And they said, yeah.
And how many people do you know have that?
I don't know anybody. It's a very rare condition, very rare. 1 in every 200,000 people have it.
So when you eat, it comes right back up.
Yeah.
So it would make sense that they would think that you had bulimia.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so most people diagnosed with this condition are between the ages of 50 and 60 years old. I was 18. And they said most people with this condition pass away within 2 to 5 years due to complications. And so they said, we don't know how to fix it. There's no cure. We can try to do a surgery. We don't know if it'll work, but we can attempt it. So over 4 years, I had 30 surgeries to try to keep me alive. And it got to the point where they're like, there's nothing more we can do for you. We're just going to medicate you to keep you comfortable until you pass away. And so when I was diagnosed with that condition at 18, it kind of solidified the programming of my childhood that I wasn't worth living. And so I was still struggling with that worthlessness and that not being enough feeling within me. And so I was going into relationships with men, not knowing how to be loved. And so having no boundaries or requirements for the love the men that I was with were giving me. And at 24, I found myself in a relationship with this man who I didn't know very well. I ended up getting pregnant by him, and he wanted me to abort my daughter. And I couldn't because she was my miracle. First, I wasn't even supposed to be alive. I wasn't supposed to be able to have kids. Now I'm pregnant, and she gave me a reason to live. She gave me a reason to love. And so because I refused to get the abortion, he started beating me every night. He said, if you don't abort her, I will beat her out of you, but you will not have this child. And so I started enduring nightly beatings from this man. And I can remember one night, I realized if I don't get away from him, he's going to kill me and her. And if she's going to have a chance to live, I have to get away from him. And so as he started laying his fists into me one night, I fought back. I fought back for the first time, and I got away from him.
Good for you.
Thank you. And I actually had to go into hiding because he kept coming back and finding me. And so I went into hiding. And 27 weeks along in the pregnancy, my illness reared its ugly head up again, and I got super sick. I went into renal failure, and they said the only way to survive, I had to deliver the baby. But she most likely would survive because she was so far along. And as long as she was 16 ounces, they could put her on the respirator and give her a chance to live. And so I delivered her, and she was 13.8 ounces. Just barely too small to be put on the respirator. So she ended up passing away. which
I'm so sorry to hear that.
it was really difficult. But honestly, now that I look at it, it was such a blessing that she never had to live in this world and deal with the abuse and all of the trauma she would have had to endure from from her father. And her purpose was to make my life pivot and to allow me to see my purpose in this world. And so when she passed away, my organs and stuff weren't coming up. They weren't working. They weren't coming online. And so the doctors called my family to the hospital bed and said, tell Tina your goodbyes because she's not going to survive through the night. And once again, my father begged the doctors to try a little bit more. Just do one or two more things. Like, there has to be a reason she's still alive. You guys have to help her. And it was really interesting because I was laying in that hospital bed, but I was like almost comatose. I couldn't speak, but I was like floating above my body and I could see everybody surrounding my hospital bed, but I couldn't talk to them. And so I remember the doctors telling my father, we'll try one more test. We don't know if it'll work, but we'll run one more test and see if the medications will work. So I remember still seeing everyone from above my body pushing my gurney down the hallway, and the doctors and nurses talking about me and everything. And I was just begging God to take me home. I was just like, Lord, I'm so tired of this life. I'm so tired of this pain. I just want to go home with Trinity. I just want to live with her. Just take me. And I remember seeing this bright light and I was like, oh, it's time. I'm going home. And he spoke to me. God spoke to me that day. And he said, I will take you home. The choice is yours. You can be with your daughter. But if you choose to stay on this earth, this is what you will have. And he allowed me to feel the love of a husband that I hadn't met yet. And he allowed me to see children playing in the backyard that I knew were mine. And then he allowed me to see all of these bright lights surrounding me. And he said, those are the souls you were supposed to touch that you haven't yet served. And so obviously I couldn't be selfish and just go home. So I stayed on this earth. And 3 months after Trinity passed away, my body went out again. They did the last surgery that they did on me when they told me there was nothing more they could do. And I had basically given up on life at that point. And then 3 months later, God brought my husband into my life. And my husband has taught me what love looks like and feels like and sounds like. And I now have 3 children that are perfect and healthy. And I now have devoted my entire life to helping women realize that they don't have to accept the path that was handed to them at childhood, but they can rewrite their script and achieve the life that they dream. So.
Wow, you said a mouthful, and I am just in awe. Before I move on, I just want to just thank you for your transparency. I do a lot of work in the area of trauma, working with people around the ACE score, trauma-informed care. And I know, Tina, what people may not know is that you sharing this story is allowing you to go back through the trauma again. And I want my listeners to understand that when you are constantly telling those stories, you almost inflicting it again, but because you have learned many of those lessons, and I want you to share some of those lessons, and you are talking about it more and more, it's much, maybe, I hate to use the word easier, but it's probably less stressful than somebody else who has not gone through maybe trauma-informed care, not used any type of practices that they may use. But there are two things there's so many things I want to ask you, but I want to go back to one thing that you mentioned. I want to move forward. You talked about ancestral trauma, and I want to sort of unpack that, because there is a book out that I shared with a lot of my listeners. It's called "It Didn't Start With You: How Inherited Family Trauma Shapes Who We Are." Can you talk about that concept of ancestral trauma, and what are some things that happened maybe into your parents that might have had an effect on you? And then I want to come back more recent. Then I want to talk about some of the strategies that you've actually used that you can share with our listeners who are struggling with pain, trauma, and loss. So let's go back to the word that you said, ancestral trauma or inherited trauma.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, most definitely. So I've done a lot of research throughout my family, and I learned that there's actually everyone is born with ancestral trauma, whether you know it or not. You get handed buckets at birth.
Yeah, it's in your DNA, and I'm so glad that you're bringing this up. It's there.
Yeah, it's there. And there's actually a science behind it called epigenetics that
Yes.
teaches how that trauma is in your DNA and in your genes. And based on the experiences that you go through in life, they release those trauma genes. So in my mom's side of the family, there's something called the black sheep syndrome, where one child is picked out of the family and that child becomes the bad child. And so my mother was that child in her family of 7 children. And my grandmother, her mother, was that child in her family. And so I've been able to track it back 2 generations because my great-grandparents have passed. But I know that my grandmother always struggled with worthiness and not being enough and being told that she was ugly and all these things, stupid, not smart. My grandmother did the same thing to my mother. My grandmother actually wrote my mom a letter when she was a child that my mother has kept, that talks about my mom being like a caterpillar, because my grandmother raised swallowtail caterpillars. So that's like the best analogy she could say. She said, "You're like the ugly caterpillar and I'm waiting for you to be able to blossom into the butterfly that you could be." Right. So she's got this like letter that she showed me when I was like 12 of see how terrible I was treated, like trying to justify the treatment. And I don't even think my mother was aware of how she passed that on to me until now when I've confronted her about it. But so I've looked into it and I didn't even know there was named for it until about a year ago, where it's called the black sheep syndrome. Now, my father, his mother never wanted children. She got married and had children because in those days, that's what they were told they had to do. And so she neglected my father and his siblings because she never wanted them. They were a hindrance to her. And I felt the same way from my father. But he didn't realize he was making us feel that way. And in my father, you earned my father's love. So if my father said, go do the dishes and you don't do it, you're no longer part of the family until you earn your way back in. If you made a mess and you didn't clean it up, sorry, you're not part of the family this week. So he handed that down, where love isn't given, it's earned. So I had buckets from both sides coming in, and I was just, like a fire hose. I was just taking it in, and I am a highly sensitive person. So I just absorbed it all and took it on as my own burden and carried the load with me and allowed it to literally almost kill me. So it's just amazing how you can just take those buckets.
And so, Tina, when I read the book, It Didn't Start With You by Mark Welland, it really opened my eyes, because and I want you to share some strategies. It was this groundbreaking approach to learning that these are the things that you inherited, like the color of your skin, like the eyes, like all the things that you inherited. Like I have a Cocker Spaniel. It's funny, my Cocker Spaniel had never been around other Cocker Spaniels. But when I put my Cocker Spaniel around other Cocker Spaniels, he did exactly what they did. And because it was a part of his DNA, nobody had to share it with him. It was just in it. What are some strategies that our listeners can use to deal with the ancestral DNA or the ancestral trauma that we've actually inherited? And then what advice do you have for those who are struggling currently with pain and trauma? So let's talk about the past. What are some things they can do? And then what are some things from the past that are holding them back? And what are some current things they can do that allow them to move forward?
Got it. So I've created what I refer to as the faith healing modality. And what that consists of is, first, you have to acknowledge what you're going through. Because if you keep running from it or stuffing it, it doesn't get you anywhere. So you have to acknowledge the pain and almost dive into it and feel it and allow yourself to process that pain. And then you have to forgive it, which is really hard for a lot of people. By forgiving that pain, you're not forgiving those people that have hurt you. You're releasing yourself from the imprisonment that you are in, that pain is causing. And then you have to honor where it's come from, right? You have to honor those people, because although, they hurt you and they handed you this bucket of crap, they may not be aware of it. And you need to be able to feel pity for them and their suffering. Because as soon as you can forgive them and understand that it was not meant to be handed down to you, not only are you healing yourself, but you're healing them and you're breaking that cycle. Then you have to accept the person who you've become. because this pain and this trauma has changed you as a person. You are no longer the person that you were when you came into this world. But by acknowledging it, honoring it, forgiving it, you now can allow it to empower you and uplift you and transform you into a more compassionate, loving, and humble person.
Yes, I love that. I receive that. I heard you mention the word, you talked about sort of holding on and suppression. How can suppressed emotions be harmful when you're holding on to those past emotions and when you're not forgiving the people that hurt you? How can it be harmful to us and harmful to the people around us?
Oh, I love that question. Okay, so we are energetic beings, and every emotion holds a specific energy. And so when you take an emotion like shame or pain or anger and you suppress it, you stuff it somewhere into your body, and it literally sets roots wherever it lands.
Yes.
And those roots grow and they take over your DNA. And if they are not addressed, first they will warn you with a emotion. So anxiety, depression, sadness, anger. That's your warning sign saying, hey, you've suppressed something here and you need to handle it. And if you don't listen to that, then your body goes into physical crisis. And what that looks like is, for instance, if somebody said something that hurts your feelings and you stuff it, it typically lands in your chest area, your heart center, and that's going to cause high blood pressure. It can cause a stroke. It can cause a heart attack. It can cause breast cancer.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you're hitting that because, I was teaching a meditation course to some teachers yesterday, and I talked about breathing through the pain. It shows up in your body. Mel Robbins, who has a brand new book out, I should know the title because I read it. She talked about when you think about, let's just say when you think about your daughter, or when you think about your daughter's father, when you think about your father, where does it show up? And I'm so glad that you're saying that. And because again, it eventually shows up in a form of dis-ease when our body is at dis-ease. And what I love about the body, and I tell people, whoever you think created this thing right here, they have an amazing blueprint, because typically, you know this better than I do. You've gone through a lot of this stuff. We get all these signs and symbols. We get it ahead of time, and we just, I'll get to it. It's like when you look at, you're driving a car. Like I have a car, and my car is like being in Las Vegas. Why am I saying that? Because every light is on. Every light on Tina in my car is lit up like I've won something. And so my car is like, fool, I told you, check engine soon. And I'm like, I can drive here, I can drive there. Fool, didn't I tell you the check engine light? So we get all these examples or these samples or these signs, and we avoid them. And I love that you're saying that they start to show up, and then they become these big things that if you would have like, well, I gave you a sign, you could have done these things before, but then now it's much bigger than that.
And that's exactly why I have echolalia, is because I couldn't speak my truth for 18 years. And for 18 years, I swallowed everybody else's bitterness towards me, and I didn't address it. And so my esophagus said, you know what, honey, you ain't listening. So now we're going to shut down. And so I have learned to, through going back and healing those emotions and speaking my truth, which is one of the reasons I do what I do, speaking out and being a transformational coach and speaker, is to heal myself. I'm allowing others to heal through my words, but I'm healing myself. And through speaking, it opens my esophagus back up and allows me to manage my condition instead of having doctors cut me apart and try to do it for me. So it's so important to address it.
So speaking of doing the work, now I want to unpack your father, your mother, and everyone else, because they played a role in this particular process. Where has that healing, or has that healing taken place with your family, your brothers and sisters, and your mother and father?
So yes and no. It has started, and it's not completed.
Thanks for your transparency for saying that, because a lot of folks come on, like they write these books and they lecture and they do all these great things, and you go into their house and you're like, I'm gonna step in some stuff. You know what I'm talking about? So I'm so glad that you said it is a process. I'm going through so walk us through the process, because there's someone listening who they can't call their dad who sexually abused them. They can't, they choose not to call their dad. They choose not to call their brother or their cousin because of those other things. And they say, I'm doing well. I'm a lawyer. I'm making 6 figures. I'm traveling all over the country. I'm a speaker. I'm a lecturer. I'm writing about healing. But I love that you said it's a process. So walk us through that process.
And also, thank you for saying it's a choice.
Yeah.
Because so many people say, I can't do that. No, you're choosing not to do that. Let's get really clear. You're choosing that. So with me, for my mom, I actually confronted her. I confronted her about the black sheep syndrome without using those words, because at the time I didn't know that's what it was. And I said, listen, my entire life, you made me feel worthless. You made me feel like I was lower than everybody else. You have taught my siblings to mistreat me in the way that you are mistreating me. And I can no longer put up with that. So I'm letting you know right now, you are not allowed in my life until you acknowledge what you have done and stop it. And once you are willing to do that, you can come back into my life. But until that happens, I can't allow you to continue to hurt me.
And what did that do for you right there? Before we get into the response, what did that do for you?
For me, that I literally felt a crack in my heart. Like I felt like I'm taking my power back. I am putting up a wall, not necessarily a wall. She can still peek over that wall, but I'm putting up a wall to say this stops here. And I am, it was like a form of protection, but also a form of empowerment, because now I'm taking my voice back, and you're not going to tell me that I can't.
And what was Mommy's response?
So she at first denied it. She said, I've never mistreated you. I've never, I showed you how I was mistreated. I didn't do that to you. She wasn't aware of it. So it took about 6 months.
At that moment, did you feel like it was now about her?
Yes.
Because I see that a lot when I do this thing called deep questionings, and I didn't create it. It came from some work with Parker Palmer, when you're talking about working with people and how you're giving her a gift, because you're really giving her a gift, you're sharing, but then all of a sudden, Tina, it became about her. So then now it's not about you, it's about, but look at what happened to me. And I don't want to doubt that what happened to her, but you came to her and confronted her so you can get your healing in hopes of, we can also heal through this process. So there was the denial, and then she talked about her stuff, and then what happened next?
Well, first, before you go there, I think it's the denial or the victimization of the other person. It's a defense mechanism, and it's easier to point the finger than to point it away from you rather than point it into you, right? And take responsibility.
Great point.
So, and that's important to understand. That's what I teach my clients is it doesn't matter if they're not taking responsibility, you're doing what you need to do, and the rest is up to them. So it took about 6 months. She actually acknowledged that she had mistreated me my entire life. And she actually did go back to my siblings, who at the time weren't speaking to me because they were trained not to. And she told all of them, listen, I taught you to mistreat your sister, and I need you to work really hard now to accept her into the family. We were all adults. We all had families of our own. I'm not close to really any of my family now. A couple of my sisters, we talk every now and then, and we get together for family gatherings, but my mother apologized. The thing that's really interesting, though, is I don't think she took that gift of healing, like you mentioned, because she still comes back and treats me at times the same way. And so I have learned to love her from afar, because until she can heal herself in the way that I healed myself, there's still damage there, and that behavior hasn't changed. And so I love her, but I love her at arm's length. So
you lost your child, you were in an abusive relationship, you had this rare disease, your family disowned you, you received every label that you can think of. Then you, on a gurney, you were about to transition to this new place. Some people call it heaven, some people call it whatever they want to call it. You saw this light. What is the biggest lesson that you've learned throughout your entire life experience? What is the greatest lesson?
I think my greatest lesson is forgiveness. Forgiveness, because you can't be who you're supposed to be if you don't forgive. You have to forgive. You have to forgive yourself. You have to forgive those around you. You have to forgive the emotions that come in. And once you're able to forgive, you're able to see people for their heart and their soul and not their skin. And so when I say skin, I'm not referring to like the physical skin, but what the judgment that you portray on other people, right? And so if you walk through this world with a forgiving heart, no one is able to wrong you. No one is able to hurt you. And you are able to love unconditionally. But when I say that, I'm not saying that you are the doormat. I'm just saying that you are able to lead with love. And if everyone could learn to forgive and lead with love, this world would be a beautiful place to live.
Now, I know you chronicled a lot of this in your book, Stuck in the Fire. I love the title, A Story of Resilience, which is an interactive, self-explorative book. What should our listeners expect from reading this book? And how can our listeners get in contact with you and get a copy of the book?
I was so excited you asked that question. So the book took me 3 years to write, and every chapter is a life experience that I went through. And I wrote the chapter based on my life experience and lessons at that time. So in the beginning, it's written from a child's perspective. And at the end of each chapter, I go back and I give the lessons that I had missed from that life experience. I ask questions for you to be able to go back and look into your life and where you need to address the same type of emotions or feelings that I had gone through in that chapter. And then it ends with life coaching, how to move forward, giving you the tools you need to work on that specific emotion or feeling so that you can move forward in your life. And it's actually the first book in a trilogy. It's called a Rising Phoenix trilogy. And the next book coming out is called Emerging from the Fire. And it's a guide to self-healing, step by step, how you can heal yourself the way I did. They can find it on my website, healingbytina.com, or it's on Amazon and Kindle as well, and soon to be on Audible. And so if you want to contact me, healingbytina.com, super simple website. I'm also on Facebook, Instagram. I've got a YouTube channel, and I've got a show that is launching next week called the Belief Breakthrough Show. So there's all in certain areas. Yes.
Congratulations, Tina. You are in the victory lap. I just envision you running around this track and you are at a victory lap. And I know when you cross the finish line, you're not stopping there. I know you have some great things that you're doing. And congratulations on all the things that you're doing. Thank you for joining me in the Bomb Shelter today. But you cannot leave right now, because one of my favorite parts of the show is called the Super Bomb Questions. And these are questions that my listeners want to know from my guests. And these are very creative questions. So are you ready, Tina?
I am ready. Let's go.
Let's go. So what is your favorite word?
My favorite word, I would say, is empowered.
What is your favorite quote or Bible verse?
Gosh, that's a good one. I think my favorite quote would be, "Stop trying to be somebody else. It's already taken."
What is your superpower?
Enlightenment.
What is your spirit animal?
A wolf.
What moves you to tears of joy?
Seeing somebody find healing.
What moves you to tears of sorrow?
Seeing somebody lose their life due to hate.
Tina, what do you wish you had more time to do?
Love on my kids.
What is one of the best or most worthwhile investments you've ever made?
Hiring a life coach to get me to where I'm at.
What's your morning routine after the biological things that we all do?
I come into my healing room and I meditate and ground myself and prepare myself for the day. Then I have a cup of coffee and run off to work.
If you were in the Ms. America talent competition, what would your talent be?
Ooh, that's a good one. Public speaking.
And that's what you're doing. So Tina Encarnacion, I want to thank you for joining me today in the Bomb Shelter. It has been my pleasure to hang out with you. Thank you for sharing your story of healing, hope, and forgiveness with my listeners. And I told you all, Sound Bombers, this was the show to listen to. Please check out her book. Check out all her YouTube channel, her new show coming out. So Tina, thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
And I also want to thank my engineer, Alec Blanc, my producer, Nicole Klimpaka. Could not do these shows without you and your amazing research and your research team, which is you. I want to also thank Supremacy for our theme music and all of you for listening. Make sure you subscribe to our show. Please leave a comment. If you like us, if you don't like us, we just want you to leave a comment because we want to bring more people to the sound bombing community. And if you want to know more about me, go to DrDRLDS.com, DrDRLDS.com. And as always, believe that something wonderful is about to happen and that some people miss the message because they're too busy looking for the mess. Thanks for tuning in, and do something for someone other than yourself today. You've been listening to Sound Bombing. Peace.